Hey guys, this is Maniac with GameAccess.net, and I got a story to tell you guys. I got to see Max Payne 3 while I was at the New York Comic Con, and it was an interesting showing. Now I have had my reserves against Max Payne 3 since it was announced, basically, and I know a lot of people that have been visiting my site. In fact, I was getting ready to write up an entire review of the previously released trailer, saying this is Max Payne. Well, from what we saw at the New York Comic Con, my fears have slightly been alleviated. I don't know exactly what's going to be in store for the final version of the game, but from what I saw that they showed, it looked like that by this point the developers really did have a taste for what was so important about Max, what made Max so great. And a lot of the stuff that was brought, a lot of the classic Max Payne staples, like the bullet time or the spin around kill cam. They call it the last man standing cam, but it was basically like when you take the last guy out of the group, camera spins around as he falls. And of course the bullet, it tracks the bullet as the bullet is going into the last enemy and stuff like that, just like it did with the sniper moves, exactly as it happens, in the first two Max Payne games. So I'm glad all that stayed around. Basically what we got to see two scenes in the game. The first scene was involving Max Payne back when he was living in New York City still. He's older. You can see he's starting to get a little bald. He's getting a little gray in the hair at this point. They got James McCafferty to do the voice and also to motion capture the character. So all of it is James McCafferty right now for Max Payne. But McCafferty has always been the voice of Max Payne. He's never been the face of Max Payne or the body of Max Payne, but he's always been the voice of Max Payne. And the truth is that it's a good thing that they brought him back. As for what's going on, it's a scene where, you've seen it in the trailers. It starts off with he's in this place with his contact, a friend of his. He apparently had just killed somebody very important. I guess he's the son of a heavy-handed Italian mobster. And they're basically planning their next move in Max's apartment. As Max is saying that, he's like, I got a job for you, man. You should come with me, man. We should come to Central America with me, and we could, you can do private security or something like that. And you can tell he's thinking about it while he's drinking heavily. Max is is hitting the sauce quite a bit. All of a sudden, as they're having this conversation, it cuts to outside where there's a huge snowstorm going on. They went there, and one of the mafia dons, I guess the mafia don himself, is screaming out, "Max Payne, you killed my son! You've got 150 Guidos ready to kill you right now! You're gonna die, Max Payne!" With a bullhorn screaming outside Max's apartment. All of a sudden, all these men with guns start storming Max's apartment building, and I'm just having flashbacks to, of course, that scene in Max Payne 2, where the same thing had happened. So Max and his friend had basically realized that they got to fight their way out if they want any chance of surviving. They start working their way out of the apartment when a whole bunch of men with guns start showing up, and you can see that obviously Max still has his bullet time abilities. He does have the ability to take cover. I was really mad about that. They're kind of playing it off like, oh, you're not going to use it. It's still run and gun. I guess they've been, But, it kind of reminded me of the cover system, and the control system very much reminded me of how Uncharted plays. So if you played Uncharted, it kind of looked like that's what it reminded me of. The way, the cover is available, but it's not a focus, and you can still run and gun. And Max still uses painkillers to heal himself. He still has the health bar. It doesn't regenerate. You could say the pain meter. A cool gameplay mechanic that's been added is that if Max has some painkillers on him if he dies, then he can get back up, but at the cost of a painkiller, and it will automatically heal him. So that's a nice little mechanic that they added. But that only works if you have painkillers on you at the time. Otherwise, you'll just die. Very important, as he's going out of the apartment building and he's going through the hallways, all of a sudden, a very, very crazy man with a bomb strapped to his chest that looked a lot like the Unabomber, and by that I mean Ted Kaczynski, not with the hood. He was just like, the face and everything else. Started spouting biblical quotes, saying that this was his time and he just started charging into the shooting guys and blew himself up in half the floor. And all I'm thinking of, why didn't they give this man his own video game? He's the most awesome guy I've ever seen. Yeah, that guy needs his own video game. Get on that, Rockstar. Make a prequel. So Max makes it up to the roof, and you see the skyline of New York, which is all intact. It was great to see that again as a jet is flying over them. So it had a really cool, the fact that they shot, the fact that they recreated the New York skyline as it currently is, was really cool looking. They did a really good attention to detail, so that was important. And it's very similar to how, of course, it looked like in Max Payne 1 and Max Payne 2, just with better graphic engine and better hardware. The other thing, of course, being that this was New York also that we were watching this in, so that was kind of cool. Okay, then we cut to sequence 2, and this basically takes place in Sao Paulo, Brazil. It opens up with the new type of graphic novel sequence. The graphic novel sequence is not static like it is in Max Payne 1 and Max Payne 2. In the original Max Payne, they kind of did it for performance reasons, a few other things, a few other reasons. There were a lot of reasons why they used the graphic novel. They chose to keep it, but they wanted to update it a bit for the, of course, they said it was inspired very much by motion comics and other types of things. Obviously, motion comics right now are very popular. It reminded me a lot of how Tony Scott shoots movies nowadays, especially given Man on Fire. And they did say that Man on Fire was a particular reference. So there are quick cuts with moving panels around, but the whole sequence is in motion. Now, that's not to say that they're not going to do traditional cutscenes. There are traditional in-engine cutscenes. The scene that I said in the previous level was a completely traditional cutscene. So what we got to do in this sequence was, it starts off with Max is hanging out with the girlfriend of his friend from the previous scene. And they're in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Max is working private security at this point. I can't remember if he shaved his head by that point. I think he had shaved his head. And so he was the balding Max Payne that we had seen we've seen in most of the trailers by this point. Still, of course, James McCaffrey's voice. And the cool thing about these sequences was that, well, they were during the daytime, so it was broad daylight. Basically, Max and his friend's girlfriend were basically being gunned down, or attempted to basically gun down in broad daylight, basically, which just goes to say, boy, I guess it really is lawless over there. And he basically has to use bullet time to stop them. They start fighting their way together. They have to operate together in order to help them, in order to basically survive through the areas. They go through back alleys, and they go through just a train station, and they kind of have to go through these train carts and stuff like that. It's a pretty cool, pretty tense sequence. Max still, of course, has access to bullet time. This is where they showed us a lot of the cool gameplay mechanics about how they kept they called it the last man standing technique, where they panned around. They kept all that intact, the final bullet attacks. They basically also showed us the weapon reticle system. Now, Max does not have the ability to hold all the weapons, like he did in the previous game. He can only hold either two one-handed weapons, which he can either have one or two of, or he can have one two-handed weapon. He can dual wield the two one-handed weapons, but he cannot dual wield, and he can't obviously he can't dual wield a two-handed weapon or anything like that. So it's basically, the way it works is basically there's a weapon wheel, and you'll be able to cycle through your weapons using that, or dual wield doing that. It's kind of stinky about that, because of course Max was very famous for having all these weapons and being able to hold on to all these weapons. But you will be able to just on the fly trade up weapons as you're moving around, pretty much like with all the other games. And you still will, of course, be able to dual wield things like Uzis and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool that they kept all that in. So there are also going to be, the final thing that they showed us in the Sao Paulo sequence was Max going through a warehouse fighting his way out. They said there will also be bullet time sequences that are basically predetermined sequences You could say they're kind of like on rail segments. At least the one that I saw very much felt like an on-rail segment. Basically, Max has to go from one floor of the warehouse to the other floor of the warehouse. He sees a hook on a winch. He jumps onto the hook, and as he's falling slowly, as the thing is going down the story, basically the entire sequence is completely in bullet time, and you're able to slow down and aim as you go down. Once you've hit the floor, the bullet time sequence ends, and you'll have to just fight your way through for the rest of it, as with the regular gameplay mechanics. They said there will be other sequences like that in the game. I think it's pretty cool that they're keeping sequences like that they have sequences like that. It's pretty cool. If I had one thing I wanted to say about the demo that I saw, you could see that all the environments were still destructive, and they showed it off by basically showing Max shooting up a gas station. Now, as far as I know, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Brazil in general doesn't use gasoline. They don't power their cars by gasoline. There are gas stations, but there's no gasoline in the gas stations. They use ethanol, and I believe it's sugar-based ethanol in Brazil. Is that explosive? I don't think it would blow up like gasoline would. I mean, can we get a science check on that one? I'm assuming that since it is fuel, obviously it probably is explosive. I don't know if it would, but they kind of made it look like it blow up exactly as a gasoline gas station would blow up, and I don't think ethanol blows up like that, but I could be wrong. But yeah, just FYI, guys, Brazil uses ethanol. It's not gasoline. They don't use gasoline over there. So that was just my one thing I wanted to say, but I didn't have a chance to. They also gave me a thumb drive with some of the cool, important information about the game itself. Most of the stuff I've talked to you about, I might have missed something here, but for the most part, I'll post a lot of that stuff as a postscript if I forgot anything. They didn't show multiplayer at all, so I can't really talk about that, unfortunately. But for what I did get to see, it was pretty cool, especially the New York segments. If you asked me, I would have hoped that all the game would have taken place in New York, but I guess they felt like they had to trade it up. And they did say that they would show the whole transition between New York and Brazil and all the journey that goes with it. Like, this whole game is basically Max's journey from New York to Brazil. I thought that was pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to the game. I wasn't looking forward to it before, but seeing the New York chapter put it back on my radar. The game is coming out in 2012. They weren't more specific than that. I think it's March. Maybe I think it's March 2012. If I can remember correctly. I could be wrong, but it is coming out in 2012. It'll be out on PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. And that's Max Payne 3, guys. This is Maniac with Game Access. Over and out.